Another thing coming out of Texas, and this one's going to be near and dear to a lot of people's hearts because it directly impacts them. And it's also impacting children. For those that may not be aware, I think it was about a month ago or so, Texas, or 2 months ago. 2 months ago or so, Texas Attorney General issued not an order, but like a suggestion to have Child Protective and Family Services, go after parents of trans kids and charge them with child abuse and neglect for respecting their gender identity. We're going to talk about that now. And it's sad that we have to, but this is important. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So Morgan Davis, a transgender man, joined Texas Child Welfare Agency as an investigator to be the advocate he never had growing up. Less than a year later, one of the first cases under Governor Greg Abbott's order to investigate parents of transgender children landed on his desk. His supervisors in the Travis County office of the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services offered to reassign the case, but maybe, he thought, he was the right person for the job. Quote, "If somebody was going to do it, I'm glad it was me," David said. He hoped it would be reassuring to the family to see a transgender man at the helm of the investigation, but the family lawyers didn't see it that way. She said, "I know your intentions are good, but by walking in that door as a representative for the state, you are saying in a sense that you condone this, that you agree with it," Davis said. "It hit me like a thunderbolt. It's true," he continued on. "By me being there for even a split second, a child could think they've done something wrong." Davis resigned shortly after that. Since the directive went into effect, each member of his 4-person unit has put in their notices as well. While the Attorney General's office has gone to great lengths to defend the governor's directive in court, the agency responsible for carrying out the investigations has been roiled by resistance and resignations as employees struggle with the ethical questions they've never faced before. More than a dozen child abuse investigators told the Texas Tribune that they either have resigned or actively job hunting as a result of this directive. A spokesperson for the Department of Family Protective Services declined to comment on the resignations or answer any specific questions, citing pending litigation. Quote, "In all investigations, we follow state law to determine if abuse or neglect has occurred, and we will continue to do so," the department said in a statement. The employees, most of whom spoke on the condition of anonymity to protect their jobs, said they feel conflicted, unwilling to undertake what they see as a discriminatory investigations, and critical of the agency's internal response to requests for guidance, but haunted by what a mass exodus of experienced child abuse investigators would mean for the state's most vulnerable children. Things are already slipping through the cracks. We will see investigations that get closed when intervention could have occurred, one supervisor said. And children will die in Texas. And the reason that they're saying children will die in Texas is because so many investigators and people that worked for Department of Family Protective Services have resigned in protest of this law. And it is an ethical dilemma that people that care so deeply about protecting the lives of children, protecting their safety, of ensuring that they can get as full life as possible with some help from the state, are put into this conundrum, because not only are they being asked to enforce a law or an ordinance or whatever you want to call it. It's effectively a law, but it's like an executive order, essentially. Enforce an executive order that will harm children and make them complicit in that harm. And on the same time, being felt that they have to stay despite this, because if they resign, like many of them have in protest, that more children will get hurt because of it. And this is really a shame on the governor. Governor Abbott this is appalling. But let's continue on. So gender affirming care is endorsed by all major medical associations as the proper treatment for gender dysphoria. The distress someone can feel when their assigned sex does not align with their gender identity. While many young people focus on social transition, dressing differently, or using different pronouns, some are prescribed puberty blockers, which are reversible, or hormone therapy. Davis felt that the directive was an unnecessary overreach. He knew firsthand that the care and caution that doctors take when prescribing treatments for gender dysphoria. Even the person who made the child abuse report didn't seem to agree with the directive. Davis said they were sobbing on the phone, distraught that they were reporting the family, but the person was mandated by law to report child abuse and feared the consequences of not making a report. So if you're not aware, there are several people in public service that are mandatory reporters for instances of child abuse. These are teachers, nurses, doctors, psychologists, counselors, youth director, people that like in Boys and Girls Clubs, etc. So anybody that essentially on their day-to-day job is responsible for the care of children is by law required to report child abuse. And under this new legal directive, gender affirming care is being considered child abuse. And it's all over cultural bullshit. It's because people believe, due to their religion or what have you, that allowing a child to just be, because that's really what it is in the vast majority of cases, just allowing a child to be, to express themselves, to exist, is child abuse. It's ridiculous. The person said to him, "Just promise you'll be kind," Davis remembered. When he visited the family, the house was clean, the pantry was well stocked, and the kids were healthy, happy, and well loved. He tried to be as reassuring as possible, reiterating again and again what a good job the parents were doing raising the children in a safe and loving way. But the family was clearly terrified, he said. Quote, "It was just heartbreaking to me, to everyone, to see what we were doing, to see what we had become," Davis said. After that, Davis said he couldn't keep working for an agency that would target families this way. Last week, he put in his notice. He is going to keep working until mid-May to wrap up as many of his open cases as he can to help minimize the burden on his colleagues. But even though Davis told his supervisor that there was no evidence of abuse, the investigation into the child's family will remain open, likely long after he's left, while the state continues to fight in court for the right to investigate parents just like these. Employees at the Travis County Department for Family and Protective Services office say they found out about Abbott's directive the same way most people did, on the news. They were shocked and devastated to see that their agency became politicized, several had stated. When they got an invitation to an emergency staff meeting the next day, many of them hoped that they would be told the agency wouldn't be following the governor's directive. Instead, they received confirmation that they would now be required to open investigations into reports of parents who provided gender-affirming care to their children. They were instructed to treat these cases very differently than others. According to a meeting agenda reviewed by the Texas Tribune, supervisors were told that they needed to notify their chain of command when they received one of these cases, and that the agency's general counsel would be working on guidelines to determine how to rule on these cases. Several employees said that they were told to mark all the cases under Abbott's directive as sensitive, a rare designation usually reserved for cases in which the DFPS employees are personally involved. They were also instructed not to communicate about these cases in writing, a directive that struck the employees as unusual, unethical, and risky. Quote, "We document as relentlessly as we do because it's a way to make sure there's individual responsibility for actions that are taken that can be tracked back to who made the decision," said one Travis County child protective investigator. "I could be held responsible for a decision made in my case that I didn't make, but I have no way to defend myself." Investigators and supervisors said they don't typically investigate cases if the only allegation is the parent is giving their child medication prescribed by a doctor. Instead, those cases are ruled out without a formal investigation and designated priority none. In fact, they said, the agency usually gets involved in cases with the opposite problem: parents who won't give their child prescribed medications. But supervisors at the emergency staff meeting say they were told cases in which parents were providing medically prescribed gender-affirming care to their children could not be marked priority none and had to be investigated. Quote, "This is literally a direct contradiction of the policy, because we're telling parents we understand that a doctor is telling you to do this, but we don't like it," said one senior level supervisor. Many of those who had stayed have been engaging in a small acts of resistance to the directive. Last week, DFPS workers from several offices signed an amicus brief condemning the order. A week after the directive came out, the American Civil Liberties Union and Lambda Legal filed a lawsuit on behalf of a DFPS employee identified only as Jane Doe, who is under investigation for child abuse for providing gender-affirming care to her 16-year-old daughter. At the hearing, a lawyer for the state said DFPS was not going to investigate every trans youth or every young person undergoing these kind of treatments and procedures. The directive was intended to convey not that gender-affirming treatment are necessarily or per se abusive, but these treatments, like virtually any other implement, could be used by somebody to harm a child, said Assistant Attorney General Ryan Kirchner. Now, watching the hearing, Travis County investigators were confused. In the emergency meeting after Abbott announced the directive, they say regional leadership told them to the exact opposite. They had to investigate these cases even if there were no evidence that these medications were being forced on a child or otherwise used as some form of abuse. A judge granted temporary restraining order, halting the investigation into that family, and scheduled a hearing to consider a statewide pause for the governor's directive. She reached out to the ACLU to see how she could help block this directive from being implemented and agreed to testify at that hearing. On the stand, she told the judge that the cases being investigated under Abbott's directive are treated differently than others, and that the ethical conundrum those cases had sparked left her no choice but to resign. The judge granted a temporary statewide injunction that day, blocking these investigations from continuing until a full trial in July. Paxton has asked the Texas Supreme Court to intervene, Ken Paxton being the Attorney General, and allow the investigations to continue while the case proceeds through the courts. And given the Texas Supreme Court's makeup, it wouldn't surprise me if they rule in his favor. After several days of confusion, supervisors said they were told that the cases are on pause. They remain open, but investigative activities are currently suspended. The injunction also stops DFPS from investigating new reports of child abuse based solely on allegations that a parent provided gender-affirming care to the child. This is rough. I've already said some of my piece about this. Like, these kids are just letting these kids be is not in any way, shape, or form child abuse. This is a concerted effort to force other people to prescribe to one's political, religious, worldview, whatever you want to call it, ideology by force of government. A lot of conservatives right now are very upset about things, and we'll talk about this, about things that happen on social media, about people being silenced because of their political opinions, whatever those may be. A lot of the times it's somebody saying something that's anti-trans, for instance, and they don't like that. But they have no problem with these laws. In fact, they love these laws. They love these laws and they want them to expand. Not only do they want them to expand, but they want them to be harsher. And they want people to not discuss what, gender, sexuality, racism, white privilege, any of these so-called quote-unquote woke ideologies that they call them in school, among friends, peers, with children as old as 18. They don't want it in college campuses, actually, so they don't even want colleges to discuss this stuff. And they want to use the force of government to make it to where these things are not talked about. Why? Well, it's pretty simple. Because they are engaged in ideological war. And it's a culture war. And they believe that if they don't engage in this, that their values will fall to the wayside. And instead of taking it up in the battlefield of ideas, they are going directly to law. Like it happens every single time. And then they call liberals tyrannical, despots, etc. I'm tired of dealing with it.